But to enter Group D, the toughest group on paper, and kick it off with a 2-0 over the guy who took second place at DreamHack Masters Atlanta, yeah, that's pretty spectacular. But this man also had that spectacular W in TVT, and now he has entered his stomping ground, TVP. I like to call him the best TVP player on the planet in the first 10 minutes of this matchup, because he truly does it better than anybody else. Representing Mouse Sports, hailing from Germany, it's HeroMarine.
And up here in the top right-hand side of the map, our blue Protoss, a player, an absolute legend in his own right. He is Classic.
Before we start talking about why we are excited for this TVP or why Gabe is so good in TVP and especially in the first 10 minutes, I do think we have to address the elephant in the room. We are kicking a best of 3 off on Altitude. And I know Classic just played Altitude against Bonnie, and that turned into a 20+ minute pretty crazy game. But to see Altitude as opening map in a TVP best of 3, especially from Gabe's side, I find it very surprising, Fear Dragon. Because if I think of Gabe, I think of small maps where he just gets Protoss players out of there in the first 10 minutes. But it takes 10 minutes to make it to the other side of the map here. So I find it surprising that we're starting.
Yeah, I find it very surprising just because it's also, I mean, it is by a pretty large margin the least played map at this entire event. And for a good reason. It's definitely one of the stranger maps. It's definitely a little bit more out there. So I think a lot of players don't really enjoy playing it. And for exactly the reasons that you were talking about, it's interesting to see it make it through the map vetoes. So I'm curious if we're going to see any of the interesting aspects of this map also come into play. There are some stranger things around the Xel'Naga watchtowers and some destructible rocks, but here's the thing. I actually feel like if we bother explaining this, and then it's like 90% of the time it never actually comes into effect. So, you know, we'll talk about it if maybe if it actually comes up.
I still think it'd be funny. I would love to hear your explanation. Fear Dragon, I'm a Protoss player. I play on Altitude. I want to take the gold. How do I go about this?
All right. So Altitude is a very, very unique map. There is a Xel'Naga watchtower blocking you from taking the base of the gold. You have to knock down the cooling tower over there that our wonderful observer map was showing you. If you want to actually... Ooh, Reaper pickup. Oh, Gabe. Little unfortunate there. Not the greatest start for someone who just came off a victory versus Maru, by the way.
Nope, and you could see there as well, that's obviously not something he's happy with. Now, sometimes we are okay with losing a Reaper if we play Terran, because we're like, all right, we get a probe or we get a perfect scout off, and then it's kind of acceptable to lose that early game unit. But now Gabe lost the Reaper without getting the scout off, and that's just really frustrating. What is less frustrating, though, is that he's playing triple CC against Stargate, and I do have the feeling that is exactly what Gabe wants to go up against if he's playing triple CC. But he's already struggling a little bit dealing with this first Adept. As he lost a Marine, he's in danger of losing another Marine and an SCV. A lot of units are very low in HP here, but 2 additional HeroMarines show up from the ramp, but a new Adept shows up as well. And this is just going to be a little bit of a messy fight. A lot of low HP units. 1 shot, 1 kill for this Adept. Gonna get the final Marine as well. Goes for the SCV instead.
Yeah, and the Adept, okay, is going to cancel the Shade over there as it doesn't feel confident. The Adept actually takes a little bit of time to wind up its attack and fire. The Marines themselves fire almost instantly, and that Adept is going to be healing its shields. His Marines, not so much. So Classic is going to just try and make do with the damage he's already done. He's sending a Stalker across the map, and I mean, there's still no signs of a bunker because they haven't had a chance to.
It's not just the Stalker, don't forget about the Oracle, right? The Oracle doesn't always just have to drop a Revelation in the main base. That Oracle can just get on top of the Marines and SCVs in the natural, and a lot of units are very low in HP already. Big Gabriel's in serious trouble here in this TVP because he doesn't have a lot of firepower. Here comes the Adept, and a lot of Marines will fall, and this Stalker will go completely uncontested. On top of that, Classic now gets a picture-perfect scout up as well. A nightmare start for Big Gabe, and it all started with him losing the Reaper, and because he lost the Reaper couldn't help out dealing with the Adepts.
Oh my god, the Oracle wreaking so much havoc. It's taking out all the SCVs that are working on that extra building as well. And the Stalker, it's actually complementing the Oracle so well. Normally the Oracle will take 3 ticks to kill Marines, to kill SCVs, to kill any of these units that are popping out. But the Stalker just popping them once, the Oracle has been able to 2-shot them instead. They just die so much faster.
I think this is the worst start that Gabe has had in TVP since the the summer of 2017, man. Like, this just does not happen to Gabe normally. Obviously, well done by Classic, getting some good damage with the adepts at first, and realizing that there is more damage to be dealt, and that's why he never slowed down. And I think even Classic is shocked by how well all of this is going. He's like, cool, very big map, but hey, you didn't have a bunker, you lost your Reaper very quickly, and at this point we can just drop a Revelation, so we keep high ground vision. These Stalkers are having a field day, and Gabe is having a little bit of a nightmare start here.
15 seconds till Stim finishes up. That normally would be a danger point, but look at how low hit points all of these Marines are now. And Kev, so many Marines have died. Would you even Stim onto the Stalker force with the Marines? I mean, maybe with the Marauder, it looks like the answer is yes. He's going to be able to dive in, snipes off one of the Stalkers, but the Marauder goes down. The Immortal is complementing this army so well, and even though the Stalkers are getting low, even though Stim is doing so much damage, who is really coming out ahead on this?
I actually think in the end this wasn't all that bad for Gabe, because as the observer here is showing us as well, because of the triple CC, or triple orbital obviously at this point, Gabe still has a pretty decent economy, and Classic just lost a pretty important unit there, the Oracle. That's the only unit he made out of the Stargate. This should have been so much worse for Gabe than what it is. If you're loading into this game right now, you're opening up the stream and like, little macro-oriented PvT, Classic couple workers ahead, doesn't look too bad for the Terran. This should have been absolutely horrific for Gabe, with how many units he lost and how he was just not ready to deal with these Adepts and the Stalkers. On top of that, Classic doesn't have a Twilight, doesn't have a Forge. Like, I'm actually shocked. Classic going triple or mortar in this specific scenario I thought was a bit weird. I don't think that Gabe is totally out of the woods yet, because his production is going to be a little bit slower than the one of Classic. And Classic has a lot of force fields here. This is some good old Wings of Liberty Protoss. Just run to the other side of the map with some Immortals, force fields, and a Colossus. But if Gabe can just hang in there for another minute, I think he's actually kind of fine in this game, and I don't think he should have been fine.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think economically it seems like he's still doing pretty well. I think my fear is just how many Marines died earlier, and I guess that is compensated by how many Stalkers and other Protoss units also died. So it's going to be really a good question, like you were saying, what is going to be the strength of this Protoss push? How powerful is this attack going to be hitting? And with all those gateways finishing up, this looks scary. Oh my god, and HeroMarine's actually loading up 2 medevacs and heading across the map right now.
Yeah, I mean, that could obviously turn into a funny base trading scenario where Gabe actually gets a lot of damage, but Classic should always have a recall available. So there's a good chance that Classic will just get a couple of Marauders here, take out 40 SCVs, and then recalls a couple of units home. The fact that Gabe is already building Vikings, though, that's kind of like his only saving grace here. I also like that he's running the SCVs to the top left and not trying to save them into the natural, because that would never work. But this Orbital is most likely going to fall. Gabe is going to try to repair it, but the SCVs cannot out-repair the DPS this Protoss army. And how is that double drop doing? The double drop has turned around, and Gabe's is going to try to defend, but yeah, he's already lost the base at this point. It's a bit of a nightmare game.
That's really unfortunate. Right as that double drop would have been landing in the main, we saw a big warp-in round for the Warp Prism for the Classic, so we would have had no warp-ins available back at home to defend a double drop if it had committed. But HeroMarine clearly feels like he does actually need those units to the double drop. He's going to be pulling the boys as well. 23 workers, 27 already going down. The Vikings trying to target fire down the Warp Prism. They are able to get it, but at what cost, Kev? We've seen every single one of those workers die. Every single one of the Marines die at this point, and even the Marauders are on a retreat up the ramp.
Yep, and even though Classic lost the Colossus, he's obviously done more than enough damage to justify this attack. And this man just keeps on rolling through this tournament, as he's now 3-0 in this group. And he takes the 1-0 lead over Gabe, takes a sip of water, and he's like, wasn't all that hard. How many weeklies did this guy win? Well, normally he's got much better starts, Classic. Gabe, it's so funny and so brutal how StarCraft 2 is, because it really all goes back to that Reaper. If the Reaper does not die to that first final Adept shot that went from the high ground to the low ground, that Reaper can just make its way home to the other side of the map. The Reaper will help the Marines fight the Adepts, then there are way more Marines that survive, then the Oracle is absolutely not an issue to deal with, and then suddenly Gabe has triple CC against the 2-base Protoss opening, and Gabe is loving life. But it all starts with a Reaper, and it basically, it was a bit of a snowball effect, and that snowball just never kept on rolling, and everything that could have gone wrong for Gabe pretty much went wrong in that game. Even the timing of picking up those units, because if he knows that this attack is coming, then maybe he's able to get a couple of Vikings out, and he's actually able to put up a bit of a fight, but now he just was not ready to receive that army at all.
No, I think you really summed it up quite well, and it's really unfortunate too, because again, I think back to just the fact that 20 minutes ago, maybe actually even less at this point, he had just defeated Maru. That should be one of the biggest confidence boosts, one of the biggest momentum boosters that you could ask for in this group stage. And now I feel like a lot of that momentum has probably just been halted because, again, of a bad start with a Reaper.
Yeah, Gabe is a veteran though, and I've asked him about these kinds of games specifically in the past, where it's like, oh man, weren't you like super annoyed or tilted after going down 0-1, and were you worried? And Gabe can actually be very chill about it. He's like, oh no, I pretty much always go down 0-1 or 0-2. It doesn't really bother me. So I think he will look at that game and be like, all right, well, that was just a bit of a disaster. When it rains, it pours, and it was pouring for Gabriel in that game. Let's move on, forget about it, and just do better in game 2, and hopefully for him, a game 3, and hopefully for us as well, because we like to see as many games as possible. In the top left side of a much smaller and much more normal map, we are looking at the main base of the man from Mouse Sports, down 0-1, it's HeroMarine.
And down over here on the bottom right-hand side of the map, we have our blue Protoss player currently sitting up 1-0. He is classic. I believe one of the 3 players that has not dropped a map yet in the group stage.
Yeah, we definitely had quite a few upsets today.
Yeah.
We had Cero losing 0-2 against Dongray Gul, obviously Gabriel defeating Maru. It's been a very fun opening day of the round of 24 here. There's one thing that I do really want to compliment Classic for in that previous game, is that obviously his plan was never to rally a Stalker and rally an Immortal to the other side of the map and fight that with another Stalker. But that was more just him reacting to how well things were going. And he probably had his little plan set up where he's like, I'm gonna go with an Oracle and try to drop a Revelation, figure out what's happening, and I'll make a Colossus. Maybe I'll make one safety Immortal, and then I go into an Observer, then I go Colossus. But he's like, wait a minute, this opportunity has just presented itself right in front of my eyes, and even though this is the largest map that we've had in a very long time in StarCraft 2, I'm going to rally these units to the other side of the map because there is potential in these units, and it's safe to say that everything he did, it just kind of worked out.
Yeah, there might, of course, be a little bit of luck involved in terms of how his opponent reacted, how the Reaper ended up dying and everything, but it's the fact that Classic was ready to seize that opportunity that really allowed him to take advantage of that and turn it into not just an advantage, a straight-up win.
And also that follow-up attack, because once Gabe finally did have Stim in that game, and Gabe did pull a couple of SCVs, and he kind of got the Oracle, he got a couple of Stalkers, you know, you could be a bit intimidated as a pro, be like, oh, whoa, maybe I should actually slow down my roll, because I just lost a couple of precious units, my opponent does have Stim, but Classic is like, nah, I still have another Immortal at home, I've got a Colossus, I'm just going to warp in a couple of Sentries, because there is no way that he's going to have Ghost and Vikings at this point. If he has Vikings, sure, my Colossus is somewhat vulnerable, but his bio is going to struggle with the force fields. And if he has Ghost, well, then my Colossus are just going to have a field day. So I loved how decisive he was on just running to the other side of the map and ending the game.
Yeah, beautifully done. He is going to be opening up yet again with another one of these Stargate openings. The Oracle clearly got some value last time. The Adept clearly got some value last time. This time, HeroMarine is not going to have any of it. Already softens up that Adept quite a bit, and that Adept Shade is going to finish up. Going to try and delay this command center a little bit. Actually does manage to successfully stall out the command center.
Yep, just the wrapping paper still left on that CC. The SCV is going to finish it up. The other Marine still in the center, though, and Classic did not change the direction of his Shade. So he does end up losing an Adept, and obviously it's not the biggest of deals, but as a Protoss player you don't have too many units in the beginning of the game, so you don't have too much DPS, and if Marines and Hellions run to the other side of the map, it can actually be kind of annoying to deal with this kind of stuff.
No, absolutely. You do really want to have some of those units, and HeroMarine is, I would almost say, a little bit infamous of doing these little move-outs of, here's 8 to 10 Marines. Are you actually building your shield battery and getting up all your units? There is a shield battery about to finish up over here. It is going to finish up in time, and there is a cost for doing this, and that's that the Stalker has a higher movement speed than the Marines. It will be able to just infinitely pick away at these Marines as they head back home.
Yep, we have a couple of Hellions, though, now driving into the main base as the Adept and the Stalker were chasing these Marines. So even though the Marines didn't get a whole lot done, the Hellions will. And don't forget that there is a Widow Mine drop heading towards the natural, I believe, of Classic as well. And these two Hellions are already having a very good time. There is an Oracle on the other side of the map, activating Pulsar Beam, grabbing a single SCV, double SCV does fall. But there are Widow Mines. I was wondering if we're going to see an Armory or not. The Armory does go down now, but it's a little bit later than I expected it to be.
Yeah, Widowmine's all burrowed by the ramp, none of them actually by the mineral line. The Stalker actually also went all the way across the map as well, so it manages to do a little bit of pick away damage at the medevac. It also knows that the Widowmines are loaded up into that. It gets so much damage done to it.
This is actually pretty bad because there is a Phoenix being produced as well. One Phoenix is out already. That Phoenix is going to look for the medevac. Gabe has changed the direction, but obviously Classic is still going to be hunting for this bad boy. But it is very important right now because we cannot forget about the fact that the Armory is going to finish up and the Oracle just used all of its energy. But then again, the Robo is done. The Observer is pretty much out. A single Ops is not always necessarily enough against these kinds of Widowmine drops, as Gabe has 7 Widowmines right now and 2 medevacs. Here comes the first one, and all 3 Widowmines do manage to burrow.
Ooh, yeah, successfully burrowing, not actually being able to pick them off in time. 5 workers going down for 3 Widowmines. Not the best start, but I actually really like for HeroMarine that the medevac at least gets out. That's a saving grace.
Yeah, that's actually not too bad, right? Because the units were in position, so that should have been a whole lot worse.
Ooh, this one's going to be tougher.
Yes, but 3 Phoenixes is not enough to deal with 4 Widowmines. So let's see how Classic is going to deal with this. Will he be able to lift all these Widowmines in time? He's not paying attention. The Observer is there as well. The Observer could take some splash damage. That is not happening. So he ends up losing only a couple of probes for now, but he doesn't have enough DPS to kill both mines, so he needs to lift that mine again, and he does. Well done by Classic.
And actually what Classic was looking at during that entire thing was the Oracles on the other side of the map, and it ended up dying to a Viking and a handful of Marines. That is where Classic's attention was, so he reacted to the Widow Mines really late, ended up losing the Oracle because he was defending back at home.
Feels like right now both guys are playing zero defense, all offense pretty much. Work accounts are still pretty close here. That's 38 SCVs on the side of HeroMarine, 40 probes for Classic. No third base for Classic. We are past the 6-minute mark. I don't think that Classic is necessarily in love with the position that he's in, but he should be totally fine to stabilize on 2 bases. If he wants to stay on 2 bases a little bit longer, maybe drop a Forge on 2 bases as well, and just crank out a Colossus or 2.
That's going to be really interesting to see how these 2 players are going to decide to play it out from here. It is kind of funny to see the Terran player also sitting at a relatively even work account and everything, but well, the Phoenix should have a good bit of map control over here. What are your thoughts as a avid Phoenix player on how aggressive a Terran player is allowed to be when there are this many Phoenix out on the map?
It really depends on the opening you went for, and it depends on how the game is going. I think at this point it makes sense that Gabe is not sending out another drop, because the Observer count is high, the Phoenix count is a lot higher than it was before. So I think it makes perfect sense that HeroMarine is just focusing on the defense. If Gabe can get a Phoenix here, that would be big. Phoenixes are very expensive units. Good job there by Classic. He turns the other Phoenixes around, wants to fight that Viking, and he's actually forcing HeroMarine to land the Viking. It feels that Gabe is going to be pretty committed to his 2-base move out. Tanks and Vikings being produced off 2 bases. He's not dropping a 3rd CC yet. He's not building any additional SCVs at the moment. This could very well be a 2-base special from Big Gabe.
Are there any big things that these Phoenix can see from the army of Big Gabe to actually identify that this is going to be this committed?
I think tank count. I feel like if you see 3 or 4 tanks and you know that Vikings are already being produced, you're like, okay, he's most likely going to be pretty serious about this move out. And obviously you fly around, as long as you don't see a 3rd CC, you have to respect the army that Terran players can produce and will most likely send your way.
Well, a lot of these units actually pulling back to deal with the Phoenix. They do manage to snipe one of them off. Is that going to be a little bit of a tip-off there for Classic that that army is starting to grow pretty heavily in size?
Yep, it's 68 army supply against 49. HeroMarine has +1 as well. Wouldn't hate a couple of SCVs being sent to the other side of the map, and that is exactly what's being done. Sometimes you can build a turret near the tanks. That's actually pretty useful, but I think the Phoenix count is not high enough to truly justify that. But just the ability to repair your tanks is very important as a Terran.
Thermal Lance about to finish up. Concussive Shells also finishing up, and we're seeing force fields have to be thrown down at the ramp to try and delay this army from moving across the map. Sentries do get picked off in the process, though. I don't believe there's 1 sentry left over for a Guardian Shield for any additional forces. He's gonna try and move in. Yeah, quickly reconsiders that decision as the siege tanks are already sieged up in a very aggressive position.
So many tanks, man. This is so difficult for Classic. How do you engage a Terran with this many tanks? Of course, in a perfect world, you find the sweet spot for your Phoenix, you lift the tank, and then the rest of the army does its thing. But Big Gabe is looking for that. He's waiting for it. And Gabe knows that all he wants is Classic to run into the tanks while the tanks are already sieged up and then he's just gonna gun down these Phoenixes. Another Phoenix falls against the Vikings.
Ooh.
I don't know how Classic is supposed to engage this, but he's gonna try.
He pretty much has to as the Siege Tank gets in range of the Nexus. We end up seeing that Siege Tank getting taken out. Shield Battery overcharge, working overtime, keeping the Phoenix alive, so the Colossus are not the first target, but all of the ground units have died here for Classic. HeroMarine is stepping his way forward to victory. The final Colossus falls, and it looks like Big Gabe is going to be able to seize game number 2.
In 9 minutes and 46 seconds, and that's what he does best. Obviously, this was a pretty messy game, and I know Gabe, he's always critical. I think he's a very honest player as well. If you ask him about this game, he will not tell you that he was happy with it. He won't be happy that the Adept was able to stall the CC. He won't be happy with the amount of SCVs he lost to the Oracle, and then he probably felt that he could have done a little bit better with the Widowmine drops as well, but none of that matters. Gabe realized the situation that he was in, and I always have to give kudos to the ability of non-stop producing SCVs by Gabe. No matter how hectic or scrappy or messy games get, this man does not skip a beat on building SCVs. And there are scenarios where you feel the Terran should be down 7, 10 or 15 workers. He's so close in the worker count, and that obviously is what allows these follow-up pushes this time around with all these tanks to be as powerful and hit as hard as they do.
I love that we kind of, with game number 1 and game number 2 combined, we've seen both of these players basically look at situations in a game arise and say, oh, okay, this wasn't necessarily my big end game plan of how I wanted to win this game, but I can adjust my plans a little bit and say, yeah, you know what, this is going to be the best thing for this situation. And I love that we've seen it from both these players now.
I think you're spot on. And obviously a couple of cute little moves being brought out there in the early game as well, right? Where it looks like HeroMarine is just donating 5 Marines. He's like, what is he doing with these Marines? But hey, the Adept and the Stalker are chasing these Marines. 2 Hellions say, thank you very much, drive into the main base. And 2 Hellions getting 6 probes that early on. Yeah, that's obviously massive damage for a man like Gabe.
That's going to be a big victory there. And of course, that means that we head into game number 3. That also is the first map that Classic has lost in this group stage. So he's going to have that little title taken away. We're still very early on in the group stage, but I think that actually only leaves 2 other players who have gone undefeated so far. Already an exciting Katowice, I would say. We're only 2 days in, and we've already had kind of some of the records broken from previous years.
And we had a couple of phenomenal games yesterday, man, especially the TVTs. It doesn't happen quite often that TVTs are the highlight of the day, but yesterday that matchup delivered. Today, man, I think it keeps all of us super hungry and excited for more group stage action. Obviously, we're doing things a bit different this year, right? We're not playing out the entire group in a single day. Every single group, we play 2 series, and then we kind of, you know, build up the storylines for the upcoming days. And I cannot wait to see how all the other series are going to play out tomorrow and the following day. But for now, let's see what happens in Game 3 on Royal Blood. In the top right side, the man from Mouse Sports, our German Terran, HeroMarine.
And over here on the top bottom left-hand side of the map, we have our blue Protoss player. He is Classic.
2 games with 2 completely different stories and obviously different outcomes. What would you like to see from Classic here in Game 3?
Ooh, good question. We're heading on to Royal Blood. You know, I feel like one thing that's kind of been interesting, I'd say, just from not just this series, but I feel like the entire day of games I've seen from Classic so far, is that I will say the games haven't been like the cleanest. And I think one thing that would give me the biggest boost of confidence in Classic is that if we can see a game where he just wins in a kind of a clean fashion, where it doesn't feel like the game just gets really messy early on, I think that would actually be the biggest thing for me to be like, you know what? I take back everything I've said about Classic. I thought he would do it pretty well, but I think he can go really far if he can just show that he can do a really, really nice, clean game versus Big Game.
Yeah, I guess the only way to truly get there is if he would open up with a Twilight Council. I think every other style is very difficult. Maybe you can go Stargate, Oracle, Phoenix, and then try to play Colossus, take all 4 gases and take a little bit of a later third. But it's so hard to get clean games against Gabe because Gabe is incredibly good in punishing Stargate openings. If they open up Twilight Council, the Protoss players, obviously sometimes as a Terran, just feel like you're forced to defend for a little while. You're forced to get a couple of tanks up, or just wait until you have Stim Bio. So we'll see what Classic decides to go for here. Haven't seen him do anything super out of the ordinary, right? Throughout
Yeah.
all of the games that we've seen him play so far in this tournament. No Australia builds.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I know Zombie Grub had asked HeroMarine about just kind of before the event was how HeroMarine was feeling about PvT builds and everything, especially one of the notable differences in this map pool versus some of the previous ones is there are a lot of large main bases. I think Royal Blood also has relatively large main bases for the most part, so she was asking him about it and kind of how do you feel about Blink Stalkers and things like that. And he actually seemed like he felt very comfortable and confident about defending against Blink Stalker aggression on this map pool. He said, actually, yeah, the map being so big, the main base being so big, means that it was actually pretty easy to just try and keep all your buildings a lot further tucked back, not feel like anything would get sniped off very easily. So it seemed like he was pretty happy when a Protoss player was opening up Blink Stalker.
He also gets to play a lot against Max Packs and Skillers, so
That's true.
he's got a decent amount of practice against it. It is going to be Phoenixes right off the get-go here for Classic. Now there are some different ways to play Phoenix, of course. Something we haven't really seen at all throughout this tournament are the Phoenix Zealot openings. I feel like it's pretty much always Phoenix Robo for these guys, and Classic will once more go Phoenix Robo. HeroMarine has a Cyclone on the way. There are a couple of very cool Cyclone Viking builds that you could go for as a Terran player, where you can actually punish some of these Phoenix openings that basically are Phoenix immediately, and it's not Oracle Phoenix, but it's pretty good in both scenarios, to be honest. We have a Medevac on the way. I find that a bit surprising. So maybe Gabe is going to be a bit aggressive with just Cyclones, a Medevac, and a couple of Marines.
I think it's something I really appreciate about HeroMarine is I feel like he has found these really interesting timings of early game units, just, you know, 1 to like 5 or 6 early game units, pushes across the map and kind of puts mild pressure on the Protoss player. And sometimes it doesn't go well, as we saw in that last game. Those Marines just basically all ended up dying to the Stalker, but sometimes he just finds a surprising amount of damage.
This really is a big Gabe special. This is the kind of stuff that you see him do each and every single Monday, and sometimes in the Monday night if he plays in the American Weekly too. Gabe will feel that there is a lot of micro potential in his army, and until Classic has Colossus, it's very difficult to fight all these Marines. But the one thing that's ultra important for Classic is that he has that shield battery. But having a battery is not enough. What he also needs to do is make sure that he protects the battery, right? You can't just hide behind your battery, because then Gabe is going to lock on that battery, he's going to kill it. This push is arriving very, very early. We're not even 5 minutes into the game. There's an Immortal on the way. Phoenixes go out. Classic will look at his army and says, hey, I can fight it, but there are more Cyclones, more Vikings on the way. I think Classic needs to be careful, and this right here, I think, is the sweet spot of where his army should be. You know, far enough forward that he can utilize that battery, that he can fight the army, but also protect the battery at all costs.
Yeah, I feel like so far Classic's been doing a great job of towing that line, finding a lot of damage without actually losing a lot of units. Gets a lift up on one of the Cyclones, but the other Cyclone able to pick off one of these Stalkers. A Phoenix also ends up falling. Marine's going to be a bit more barren, and it seems like HeroMarine's mostly on a retreat, locked onto another Phoenix, takes out the shields, but not able to actually do any real significant damage. And he's continuing to bleed out Marines. The Siege Tank will be the saving grace there for HeroMarine, though.
Yep, I think that Classic was already a bit adventurous going out that far while going up to 3 bases, but the man is just full of confidence, and I guess confidence is very important, but you definitely don't want to run into the tank. Gabe is not totally done yet though, and he's not all in at all, because there is a 3rd command center on the way on the other side of the map, and an eBay, extra refineries, but Gabe still feels that he can poke and prod a little bit here and maybe get some lock-ons going, pick off a couple of these Phoenixes, because just resetting the Phoenix count would already be a very big victory for Gabe, because opening up Stargate is obviously a pretty committed choice. Building multiple Phoenixes, that's all very expensive. So Classic really wants to keep those bad boys alive, and Gabe kind of wants to reset that Phoenix count, but Classic is too good to let that happen.
Yeah, it's also pretty interesting though, because the one Phoenix that died, it never got replaced. There's only been the 2 Phoenix so far.
And it's crazy as well that despite all of this, Gabe has now taken a 6 worker lead. So yes, that's painful, but they both live. Very important for Classic. Gabe is so good at producing SCVs, man. He can micro, he can lock on, he can like dart back and forth, in and out of range. But one thing he will never do, and that is stop building SCVs. Well, you can see some of the Protoss players, if they're under a lot of pressure, they'll be like, okay, I really shouldn't be building any probes right now, because he could be doubling down on the aggression, and then I'm in trouble. And Gabe hasn't done that, but he has created a 5-worker lead for himself as a Terran against the Protoss. That's something that he's got to be very, very happy with.
Oh, he's got to be thrilled about that right now. And I mean, even just little things like those Phoenix when they were trying to move across the map, they're not trying, two Phoenix are not there to try and do a lot of harassment. They're there to get scouting information. They're there to see where things are at. Being able to deny little things like that, sniping off or pushing back a hallucinating Phoenix scout, Gabe is just doing a great job as we move into the kind of the later stage of the mid game.
We must have a War Prism on the... Okay, yeah, there we go. War Prism gets fired up because Classic has clearly invested in a lot of gateways. The Templar Archives even being done already, so Classic can make the old school Colossus, Zealot with charge and Archon attack, and that is a very, very difficult attack to deal with as a Terran player. Getting Bonkers is an excellent choice for Gabe. What a perfect scan, because seeing the Archons this early on is going to give Gabe all the information that he truly needs, and it will tell him what he needs to worry about. And I feel that Classic is switching gears immediately by dropping a 4th base, and he's probably not going to commit as much. Oh, that's actually sick by both players, because I do really believe that Classic wanted to attack, but the moment he got scanned there, the Archons got revealed. He's like, yeah, now my opponent's probably going to be too ready. So he flips the script immediately, goes 2nd robo, and drops a 4th base. Really cool play from both players.
Yeah, really, really nice adjustments from both of these players. I'm actually really curious. I thought maybe HeroMarine, the adjustment he would be making is saying, okay, do I need to start thinking about getting up Ghost a little bit sooner rather than later? But now I'm actually very interested. Is it something or you think, don't worry about the Ghost right now if you think the attack was going to immediately come, but now maybe if the attack isn't coming, you start investing in them?
Yep, Ghosts are very important, but what's even more important is having an answer for the Colossus. And Gabe clearly prioritized Vikings, and he's like, well, Archons alone are not going to kill me. Classic right now is finding some really good damage with just a couple of Zealots.
Jeez.
4 more Zealots get unloaded in the main base, and there are Vikings and there is a missile turret, so the War Prism will fall, but not before 23 SCVs go down against 8 Zealots or so. Gabe does get a cancel on that Nexus at 6 o'clock, and now I feel like here we are again. But you know, with Zealots and Archons, I feel that Classic has a much, much better chance at holding than he did in the previous game.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be very, very awkward now, it feels like, for HeroMarine. He's going to be able to find a nice angle over there against that Colossus. Definitely chips away its hit points.
That's so many Zealots though, Rafi. I actually don't think that Gabe can end the game, even though he may be tempted, and he wants to. I don't think he can, and he is indeed wisely retreating to the other side of the map, because Zealots and Immortals would be too powerful here defensively. Gabe needs a bigger army, needs more firepower, as now the armies are flirting with each other in the center of the map. Classic indecisive and gets punished for it, loses a couple of Zealots.
Yeah, a lot of those Zealots are losing their shields as well, so going to need a few extra seconds, but it's just going to send him straight across the map. It says that counterattacks have been working for me pretty well so far. Why stop now? Colossus going to be in some trouble as the Phoenix get picked off. Now those Vikings don't really have anything to attack except for the Colossus, and those Zealots are actually, okay, well, I was going to say they look like they were being dealt with, but in fact, after we move out of the picture, we see those Zealots arrive, and they are going to be annoying to be cleaned up.
Yep, Classic is going to have Blink soon, and that's very important, because then he can finally protect these Colossus a little bit better. Gabe is going to reinforce this army with Liberators, so Gabe is then going to be even more committed than he already was. He's got 124 army supply, no armory, no Ghost Academy, no 4th base. It does feel that Gabe is really looking to end this game in the next 90 seconds. It's not going to be easy, but I will never count Gabe out.
Really cool decision. We're seeing Immortals being added in over here because Classic's identifying it's going to be hard to keep the Colossus alive against this many of these Vikings. So many Immortals actually in the mix alongside those Archons, and this may be where Classic has to make his big stand. He cannot give up ground on this location, because if he does, he loses the base, the most important base.
Gabe's scans have just been cash money, man. Like, seeing this army and preventing the flank has been big, but Classic is going to try one more time. Gabe is already aware of it, sends a lot of Marines to the right side, but there are Colossus there too. The Liberators are not really taking part of this fight, but Classic is losing a lot of units. All the Vikings are going to land on top of the Immortals, and does HeroMarine have enough firepower in this Terran army? It seems that the answer is yes. It seems that it's always yes when it's Gabe and TVP.
Big Gabe is too big to be stopped. And Classic, he's going to fire out one disruptor shot, but Big Gabe is on top of it. Does actually fall literally on top of that one, so takes some big hits. He's also stimming really heavily right now. I think he just double stimmed. I think he still should have enough to clean up over here. He has more than double his opponent's army supply, or overall supply. It's 63 army supply to 5 now. But man, Big Gabe being able to pull this off, that was a really, really well done engagement.
The ultimate TVP best of 3 from Gabe here, as he alienated those disruptors from the rest of the army. Now he's having a little bit of fun with the medevac pickup micro, but Classic has 0 army supplies, so Gabriel gets the job done.